Fun එක next level කරන dialogue fan blaster.
Tonight, on First at 9 this Friday the 6th of December 2024. Marching on, vote on account for the first 4 months of 2025 passed in Parliament without a vote. The tech metamorphosis. President assumes office as the Minister of Digital Economic Affairs. Stresses on the need to embrace digital transformation in Sri Lanka. Uncle Sam approves. US Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu calls on the Prime Minister and several key Sri Lankan leaders. Pledges continued US support towards Sri Lanka's reform agenda. Key appointments. 4 new appointments made to the Constitutional Council. President's representative yet to be appointed. Reimagining Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka to develop a new national branding strategy, reveals the SLTDA chairman. Further reveals ambition to attract multiple new markets.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwasi dinu Sensodyne, then Langamati Pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta parisang karagatot? Api parisang.
Asian Paints Causeway Aquasafe Vesat Matui Gadarat Disney.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now taking you straight to your top story this evening, President Anura Dissanayake highlighted the government's firm determination to improve Sri Lanka's digital infrastructure in a bid to further spur efficiency in the local economy. The President made those remarks while assuming office as the country's Minister of Digital Economic Affairs. Meanwhile, the Chief Advisor to the President on Digital Economy, Dr. Hans Vijayasuriya, pointed out that technology could be the tool Sri Lanka needs to quash various societal inequalities prevalent at the moment.
President Anura Dissanayake assumed office as the Minister of Digital Economic Affairs yesterday at the Ministry of Digital Economic Affairs. Eranga Weeraratne also assumed office as the Deputy Minister of Digital Economic Affairs at the same event. The event was graced by several officials, including the Chief Advisor to the President on Digital Economy and Chairman of Information and Communication Technology Agency, Dr. Hans Vijayasuriya.
ජාතික ආර්ථිකයේ ප්‍රගතිය සඳහා තමයි මේ අපි එක් වෙලා ඉන්නේ.
We have joined hands in the interest of the economy's progress. If we have aspirations regarding the country's digital economy, we must have an action plan and conduct relevant analyses to see if we can increase the country's GDP by a certain percentage. If we proceed with that determination, we can eliminate the various inequalities prevalent within society by using technology. Technology will triumph if students in Colombo and those in remote areas of Sri Lanka can receive education of the same quality.
The government cannot proceed alone. The private sector has a pivotal role to play in the digitalization process. A large group of organizations, including the Bill Gates Foundation, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, have agreed to aid the government in this venture. All those organizations believe that this government can usher in prosperity for Sri Lanka. They are all of that opinion, and so we have their support.
The country cannot proceed with the traditional forms of filing paperwork and long queues of people in front of officers. We believe that digitalization is the most important solution to transform the country for the better from its current plight. We are determined to make this a reality. reality. I believe that we are many years behind. However, we must execute our responsibilities by exerting a lot of effort. The government will give its utmost support and we will delegate the required responsibilities accordingly. The interests of the political authority and the state officials of this ministry must not be diametrically opposed. Everyone here is an expert in the industry. I have the same aspirations as you do to see this industry soar to new heights. I do not have other expectations. Your needs and ours are the same. If we do not do this now, no one will ever do it.
Meanwhile, President Kumara Dissanayake held discussions with the officials of the Ministry of Energy and several other institutions affiliated to the ministry yesterday at the Presidential Secretariat. The discussion centered around the renewable energy sector of the country with a particular focus on the solar panel initiatives. President Dissanayake directed officials to review ongoing contracted projects and expedite the implementation of the productive projects. He also stressed the need to take appropriate measures against any projects found to be ineffective despite having been contracted.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Now, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu, currently in Colombo as part of an official visit to the island nation, met with several key Sri Lankan leaders, including Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya and Speaker of the House Ashoka Ranwala. During discussions, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu reaffirmed U.S. support for Sri Lanka's reform agenda. Discussions focused on Sri Lanka's priorities and strengthening cooperation in education, agriculture, anti-corruption measures and equitable economic growth.
A U.S. delegation led by Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs Donald Lu arrived in Colombo yesterday as part of an official visit covering India, Sri Lanka and Nepal. The official visit aims to promote sustainable economic growth and strengthen people-to-people ties. USA Deputy Assistant Administrator Anjali Kaur and Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury Department Robert Caproth accompanied U.S. Assistant Secretary Donald Lu as he meets senior officials of the newly elected administration. Discussions are expected to deepen ties with the new government, support its efforts to combat corruption, and explore how the United States can support Sri Lanka's governance and economic reform agenda through tailored technical assistance, capacity building, and development programs. Against this backdrop, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu called on Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath today. The meeting was also graced by U.S. Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung. Taking to X messages, U.S. Ambassador Julie Chung noted that the U.S. delegation congratulated Sri Lanka's new administration and discussed shared priorities and also explored ways the two nations can work collaboratively through tailored programs, capacity building and technical assistance. Chung highlighted that these efforts are aimed at supporting the island nation's economic and governance reforms to benefit its citizens. Thereafter, the U.S. delegation led by U.S. Secretary of State Donald Lu met with Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya and engaged in discussions. The discussion was also attended by U.S. Ambassador in Colombo, Julie Chung. In an X message, Ambassador Chung noted that discussions focused on Sri Lanka's priorities and strengthening cooperation in education, agriculture, anti-corruption measures and equitable economic growth. Ambassador Julie Chung further highlighted that the U.S. delegation reaffirmed U.S. support for Sri Lanka's reform agenda. Prime Minister Dr. Amarasuriya emphasized the government's commitment to transparency and accountability, highlighting the importance of aligning the education system with economic needs to foster a skilled workforce. The Prime Minister's office reported that discussions also focused on Sri Lanka's IMF program and the role of international partnerships in stabilizing the economy. The U.S. delegation thereafter called on the Speaker of Parliament Ashoka Ranwala and engaged in discussions centered around Sri Lanka's reform priorities and the critical role of Parliament in advancing the Sri Lankan people's mandate of accountability, transparency and inclusive governance. During the meeting, the U.S. delegation reaffirmed their commitment towards supporting Sri Lanka's democratic institutions and a prosperous future. The delegation also met with opposition leader Sajith Premadasa and discussed the essential role of diverse voices in a vibrant democracy. The discussions focused on priorities such as inclusive governance, accountability, and economic prosperity. The US delegation led by US Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu also met with representatives of civil societies and shared continued concerns about pending and new legislation such as the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the Online Safety Act, and the NGO Bill. US Ambassador, mentioning the meeting in an X message, noted that the United States will continue to encourage the new government to incorporate the views of all stakeholders to ensure inclusive dialogue, which is key to advancing democratic governance and protecting human rights. US Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu is slated to conclude his trip in Kathmandu, Nepal, meeting with senior leaders to advance cooperation on environmental protection, women's empowerment, and sustainable development.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
ඩයිබටිසෝල් සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
ප්‍රයිම් ගෲප් ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වතාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන ලෑන්ඩ් ලීසින් ලේසියෙන් මීටමක්.
Single 1111 up to 60% off from the 11th November to the 17th of November.
Kalani wire කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. Kalani Fire Shield Wire.
And now moving on to a story at the center of national attention, the vote on account for the first 4 months of 2025 was passed in Parliament today without a vote at the conclusion of its second reading. The vote on account estimates total government expenditure at 2.6 trillion rupees, while revenue projections are set at 1.6 trillion rupees. Accordingly, the initial borrowing limit has been set at 1 trillion rupees, while the government is authorized to raise it up to 4 trillion rupees in the event of delays in debt restructuring process.
The second reading of the government's resolution for the vote on account for the first 4 months of 2025 was held in Parliament today. During parliamentary proceedings today, parliamentarians wore an orange armband in support for the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence global campaign.
International sovereign bondholders have the opportunity to express their opinion on the debt restructuring process, which your government was also involved in. That will be on the 12th of December. Before that, we are ready to debate the ISB restructuring agreement in Parliament, express our disagreement with it, and aid you in striking a new agreement.
ISB එකඟතාවයකට අපි යන්නට ඕන අපි සෝදා.
මේක වෙනස් කරලා අවුරුදු ගිවිසුමකට යනවා නම්
Reaching a new ISB restructuring agreement will take another year. Considering the negative economic impacts of that delay, we chose to bear whatever loss the current agreement may cause and advance our economic program.
රට ඉදිරියට ගෙන යාමේ ප්‍රායෝගික ප්‍රවිෂ්ටයක් සඳහා.
ඊයේ කබීර් රෂීම් මන්ත්‍රීතුමා
As MP Kabir Hashim said yesterday, you have presented the same expenditure heading from former President Ranil Wickremesinghe's time, only scaling it down for 4 months. However, this is not the government's fault. Rather, it is the fault of the officials who have deceived you. The same officials that deceived us for the past 70 years are doing the same to you. The Director General of the Budget inquired from the President's office on whether the expenditure heading should be amended. Instead of amending it, the officials simply forwarded the previous budget with a 10% addition. This is what they have been doing for the past 70 years. You were not elected to repeat what was done during those 70 years. That is why I say that governments fall because of their officials.
It is important that the new government look at the mandate the people granted them critically. The patriotic people of this country were disillusioned with the corruption of previous regimes, and they expressed their disappointment by voting for you. Do not think for a moment that they voted for you after reading your manifesto or with an understanding of your politics. However, we want to help you. That is the politics of camaraderie. We are discussing the prices of coconuts and rice. This country cannot be developed with this mindset. In order to become a developed country, the mindset of the state has to change. There are around 80 institutions under the president's charge. That cannot be the case in an entrepreneurial state. The chief executive must be free to think creatively. How can he do so under these circumstances? Therefore, we advise him to relinquish control of these institutions. Racism was often a topic in this house. However, do not conflate racism with nationalism. There is a big difference between the two. You are mistaken if you believe our nationalism is racism. You can never take the country forward without motivating the people.
මේ රටේ ජනතාව අභිප්‍රේරණය කරගන්න නැතුව ඔබට බෑ කවදාකවත් මේ රට ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්නට.
ඊයේ දවසේදී මේ කබීර් රෂීම් මන්ත්‍රීතුමා කිව්වා වර්තමාන ජනාධිපති අනුකුමාර සානායක.
Yesterday, MP Kabir Hashim revealed that the allotment of funds to the office of the president under Anuradha Dissanayake is similar to the allotments made to the same office under the tenure of former President Ranil Wickremesinghe. He inquired how that is possible if we had cut down expenses. We promise you that a significant amount of these allocated funds will not be spent but will be returned to the treasury. We have allocated 146 million less for the incumbent president compared to what would have been allocated to former President Ranil Wickremesinghe. There is one expenditure heading which has increased by 6.21 million rupees compared to Wickremesinghe's time, which are the funds allocated for former presidents. The only reason that increased is because Ranil Wickremesinghe was added to the list of former presidents. The funds allocated for us are clearly less than those allocated for former President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Not only that, we will also save a significant amount of those funds.
අඩු විතරක් නෙවෙයි මේක අනිවාර්ය වශයෙන්ම අපි ඉතුරු කළාත් දෙනවා.
At the conclusion of the day sitting, the government's resolution for the vote on account for the first 4 months of 2025 was passed without a vote. Subsequently, Parliament was adjourned until 9:30 am on the 17th of December.
Now, in other developments concerning the Parliament, 4 appointments were made to the Constitutional Council today. Accordingly, parliamentarian Abubakar Adam Bawa has been appointed to represent the ruling party. Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa has been appointed to represent the opposition, while parliamentarian Ajit P. Pereira of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya has been appointed as the representative of the opposition leader. Parliamentarian S. Sridharan of the Lanka Tamil Arasu Katchi has been appointed to represent the minority parties. Meanwhile, it was reported that only the president's representative is left to be appointed. The deadline for the submission of campaign finance reports by candidates who contested the 2024 parliamentary polls is set to expire at midnight tonight. However, the top election office says that 6,376 candidates who ran for office this year are yet to submit their income and expenditure reports.
The 2024 parliamentary election was the first general election held in Sri Lanka after the enactment of the Regulation of Election Expenditure Act No. 3 of 2023. As per the provisions of the Act, candidates contesting an election must declare their campaign finances to the Election Commission within 21 days of the election's results being declared. Accordingly, the deadline for candidates who contested the 2024 parliamentary election to submit their income and expenditure reports is set to expire at midnight tonight.
As of the evening on the 3rd of December, only 1,985 candidates out of a total of 8,361 candidates have submitted the required reports. Considering the political parties and groups involved, only 106 political parties and groups have submitted the relevant reports from among a total list of 690 such parties and groups. Additionally, only 57 national list candidates from among 527 had submitted reports. Pursuant to Section 8 of the Regulation of Election Expenditure Act, the Election Commission and the returning officers are obligated to hand over the relevant documents to the police in order for them to initiate proceedings under the Penal Code against those who fail to submit their reports within the stipulated time. I would like to emphasize that it is not only those candidates who were elected to Parliament that must submit these reports, but every candidate who submitted nominations to contest the election. If legal proceedings are initiated against a candidate over this matter, such a candidate could lose the right to contest future elections. Now, the Ceylon Electricity Board has submitted its proposal for electricity tariff revisions to the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka earlier today. Through the submission, the Ceylon Electricity Board has informed the Commission that the current electricity tariffs should be maintained for the next 6 months. A slew of horrific murders are the focus of our News in Brief segment this evening. The murders were reported from Norelia, Gampa, Ratnapura and Padaviya.
An 85-year-old security officer deployed at the Norelia CTB depot was stabbed to death by a group of assailants earlier today. According to the investigation authorities, the fatal stabbing was committed with the motive of robbing close to 900,000 rupees of CTB revenue secured within the depot premises. The Norelia police have already arrested 2 individuals suspected to be involved in the murder while also recovering a portion of the stolen funds. The deceased victim was identified as a resident of Galway's land, Norelia. Meanwhile, a murder of a 24-year-old female was reported from Katavala, Ratnapura. Investigations have revealed that the victim was clubbed to death by a blunt instrument during the early hours of the 4th of December. The Siripagama police have arrested a 27-year-old individual over suspicion of committing the gruesome crime. In other news, the Gampaha police discovered the mortal remains of a 14-year-old girl concealed within a sewage pit at a construction site in Akaravita, Gampaha. Subsequent to a formal complaint being lodged with the police by the child's mother yesterday, the police initiated investigations to locate the child. According to the entry filed by the victim's mother, the victim had been missing since the 2nd of December. During the course of investigations, the police arrested the victim's stepfather over suspicion of being involved in the victim's disappearance. Upon interrogating the suspect, the police recovered the remains of the 14-year-old child from within a sewage pit covered by a concrete slab located at a construction site. Further investigations into the matter are being conducted by the police. Meanwhile, a 73-year-old woman was shot dead by 2 unidentified gunmen in Boghavava, Padaviya. The assailants who opened fire at the victim are reported to have arrived at the scene of the crime on a motorcycle. According to authorities, the victim succumbed to her injuries upon admission to the Padaviya hospital. The Padaviya police will be conducting further investigations into the matter.
Welcome back. Now, Chairman of the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Buddhika Hewawasam, revealed plans of formulating a new nation branding strategy for Sri Lanka next year with the aim of attracting multiple markets. Hewawasam added that Sri Lanka's existing tourism tagline, "You will come back for more," will be changed accordingly.
During an interview with a Singapore-based news outlet, Chairman of Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Buddhika Hewawasam, noted that Sri Lanka will bring together all stakeholders in tourism at a conference in January next year. Hewawasam added that the conference is aimed at finalizing a nation branding strategy to propel the industry, which is enjoying a period of growth. The tourism campaign tagline, "You will come back for more," will be discontinued, and instead, a nation branding strategy will be developed accordingly. SLTDA Chairman Buddhika Hewawasam highlighted that Sri Lanka seeks to develop a national brand with proper utilization of input from January's conference. He added that tourism in Sri Lanka will focus on promoting cricket and its tea, 2 things which Sri Lanka is famous for in the future. Hewawasam noted that the tagline, "You will come back for more," was developed in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis in 2022, both of which affected Sri Lanka's tourism industry. He further said that the previous tagline was created to woo back tourists in the aftermath of the pandemic and economic crisis and is not relevant today, as Sri Lanka has won a lot of recognition in recent times internationally, and stressed the importance of formulating a strategy that attracts all markets.
Now, in other business news, Sri Lanka Customs has collected 1.38 trillion rupees in revenues so far this year, the most during a 1-year period. Customs media spokesperson, Additional Director General of Customs, Sivali Arugoda, expressed optimism in achieving the 1.53 trillion rupee target set for 2024.
The revenue target set for us this year is 1.53 trillion rupees. 1.38 trillion rupees has already been collected as of yesterday. This year's revenue is the most collected by Sri Lanka Customs within a year. It is also 90% of the target revenue. We believe we will be able to achieve the annual revenue target set for us by the end of the year.
The Colombo Stock Exchange ended in positive territory this week as a result of price gains in counters such as Haley's, Sunshine Holdings and LOLC Holdings. The all-share price index closed 0.4% higher at 13,613.37 points, while the S&P Sri Lanka 20 increased 0.22% to end at 4,062.05 points. Market turnover crossed 4.9 billion rupees. The food and beverage and tobacco sector was the top contributor to market turnover, followed by the diversified financial sector. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers, selling shares worth 646 million rupees. That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.